It's a lot of work to be miserable. It's a lot of work to be stuck. The amount of energy that we spend in that filth that we get comfortable in, if we just reframe it and redirect it.
As a young child, Edwina Adams was quiet by nature. She would whisper when speaking. In boot camp, she was thrashed for not yelling loud enough. But when she discovered her ex-husband was a con man, she started to make noise, proving you don't have to be loud to make some noise. Now Edwina's on a mission to motivate. So kick back and tune in for candid conversations with those who have harnessed the power of their voices. Let's make some noise.
Welcome to Let's Make Some Noise, where you can make some noise no matter what you sound like, and where noise is my acronym for a narrative of inspiration, strength, and encouragement. And today we have joining us Sara Shaffer. She's a life strategist, coach, advocate, survivor, and she helps Gen X women get out of their dumpster fires. Who doesn't want to do that? And she has 25 years in social work. Hi, Sara. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Edwina. How are you?
I'm good. So I know that backstage you mentioned you're working at the hospital, and that's why you had the lovely hospital lighting in the background there. So we'll get into how you incorporate your life's work into what you're doing into coaching Gen X women, but what do you do at the hospital?
So I am a medical social worker. So I do the discharge planning, the crisis intervention, pretty much your jack of all trades. And we're in a pretty community-based, not very affluent population. And so it's real nuts and bolts here. You know, it's what I love. It's where I started. You know, I've been a medical social worker for 25 years. So just being in that industry and being a social worker, you know, now that I'm 51 years old, you look back and you can make all those connections as to, that's why I do this.
Typically, people like you who do this work, this social work, and that are really passionate and drawn to it, it's because they have some pain in their past and they're just drawn to help other people. So what is your story? You know, I would love to know the backstory there.
So, you know, I was raised by an Orthodox Jew, an agnostic Episcopalian. The joke now is my husband's Lutheran and we sent the kids to Catholic schools. I'm like, I got all bases covered. But
Okay.
you know, they were two human beings who had their own stories and came together. My father's family, his father's first wife and daughter were in the Holocaust, and all of the stuff that just gets passed down. My mother's parents were Looney Tunes, alcoholics, and you know, I was the only biological child to them. I had a half sister who was my mother's from a previous marriage of an abusive husband. And I was the only one between my mother and my father. And at 5 years old, they started taking in these adopted boys all over the age of 13, horribly abused physically and sexually. And you bring that into a house with two existing girls, young girls. You know, the story is it's typical. You know, I mean, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that this is a hot mess. So all of that going through, having some abuse from one of the adopted boys as well, and was just always propelled to, you know, be the best and look the best and do the sports. And I wasn't any of those. I was overweight. I was a terrible student. I went to a very prestigious high school in New Haven. And my father would come in. My father went to went to Cambridge, came over to the United States, went to Cornell, Dartmouth, and finished off at Yale. And so in his world, you know, in his eyes, he's everything. And Ivy League's the only way to go. You know, my class, sure, it was 82 kids and 80% went Ivy League in first tier. My father walked in and he's like, Princeton, Dartmouth, Cornell. And the college counselor literally laughed. It was like, that is not happening. So needing to be a figure skater and be immersed in that whole world as an overweight kid and, you know, just not that good. So constantly never living up never doing. And in my high school years, very had all of the eating disorders come on. Again, it was the 80s and 90s. This was what was cool to do back then. If you weren't anorexic or popping diuretics and all of that stuff, you were not cool. And I went to college and did the whole thing and was constantly looking for these boys that weren't available. If you were attached or not interested, man, I wanted you even more. And so you go through all that. And throughout this was a background of a constantly ill mother and a father who bathed in the attention of drama and constantly being pulled back into everything that it was my responsibility to manage, and I started to figure things out very quickly. And so I was always recruited to do that, and it just came naturally. And so I went into social work, and in college, I started having dreams about the adopted brother. And of course, related to my parents. And, now I'm starting to connect other dots and was told I was a liar. I was a horrible human being. How could I behave that way? They had it so hard and all that kind of stuff. And everything always looked good on the outside, very well to do, whatever. But the screaming, the cops coming to the house, one of my brothers holding my mother down in front of me for money. It just, the list goes on and on and on. So, your coping skills, your developmental fight, and freeze are nurtured in that time. And if it is constantly on fire because you just don't know what's coming next, then that carries on into your early adulthood and your later adulthood. And you're just rocking off the seat of your pants. So go to college, go to grad school, master's in social work. And I'm decided I wanted to live in New York and I couldn't make a living on a social worker's salary in Manhattan. So I kind of BS'd my way and made my resume look the way that it should. And I went in and I ended up getting an assistant job at Deutsche Bank, Thomas Weisel, and Goldman Sachs. I was living a life that 20-year-olds just should never live. And it was the 90s, and everything that you can imagine about Wall Street, 80% true, really hardcore. And 9/11 happened. So I'm living this 20-year-old life. This is fabulous. And of course, we've been told we're safe. So I was on Ficken in between 5th and 6th, and the first plane hit, and I worked on the international trading floor. And my best friend was in the second tower, and they had told them not to evacuate. Second plane hit. I know people that are jumping, and we have to make a pilgrimage down 2nd Avenue, and we're a block from the UN, and the Pentagon gets, this is like 7 tragedies, 7, 8 things that happened within 90 minutes. And
so you were in one of the towers when
no,
it hit?
no, ma'am. I was on 52nd in between
Okay.
5th and 6th. But
Okay.
in order
Gotcha.
to get off the island, we all had to walk and make a pilgrimage over Manhattan Bridge, right by, covered in everything, the smell. So I lost my mind. And I was like, if they're going to come get me, they're going to have to come find me. And that's how I lived. And I wasn't making the money that I was making before, and I was spending it. And all along this, I had met my husband in 1999, and things just, it wasn't the right timing. It wasn't whatever. We kept in touch. And after 9/11, that next April, we ran into each other and got married the next May. And it'll be 22 years this May. And, the support he gave and all of this amazing, tolerance of losing my mind, and to me, this was the catalyst of kind of my drinking. And, because you kind of butt into a raging alcoholic just with these couple of things. So we get married, we have our first son, and he's perfect. And we're, just living the good life, and we're having baby number 2. And it was a perfect, normal pregnancy, nothing. And he had a seizure on day 4. and he could not do any of his many milestones. Head was big, belly was big. We thought he had RSV at 6 weeks. Turned out his nasal passages weren't being chewed away. And all along, I thought I ruined my kid because I drank red wine, during my pregnancy. And so I'm down that spiral. And finally, the pediatrician feels, and this is 5.5 months. He said, I don't think I feel his spleen, but I shouldn't feel his spleen at all. So we get an ultrasound. The liver and the spleen are huge. We get blood work, and he calls me and said, we've express admitted you to AI DuPont, pack your bags. His white cell count is 44,000. And working in medicine my entire career, I knew that meant leukemia. So we get there and they diagnosed us with leukemia at first. And the next morning they come in and said, it's this disease called malignant infantile osteopetrosis. My husband and I look at each other and I'm like, how as a parent do you get to the point of being like, I wish it was leukemia because I know what that word means, but I have no idea. And
Yeah.
they said, untreated, he'll die by the age of 2. And the only treatment that may work is a stem cell transplant, and that very well could kill him. What would you like to do? So we opted for option 2. And remember, I got a 3-year-old still hanging out on the sidelines, and put these new stem cells in and hope that they work and deal with all of the mishigas that comes with it. So it was a beautiful transplant. He is cured of that disease. It did leave him completely blind in his left eye, partially blind in his right. He's missing 14 teeth and has had dental work over the last 7 years that would make any grown human being cry. And now, just this past August, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So when I talk about in my practice and whatever, that roll with the punches, that tuck and roll mentality, because I have no choice. There is nothing.
Yeah.
But in the whole world of it, my brain is all cluttered from all that crap from childhood that I have no control over. I'll never get my day in the ring. And it's just mulling around. And she's going whack-a-doodle all the live long day. And I have all this stuff that I have to be present for. And all I was doing was drinking. I mean, nonstop. And I ended up going to rehab twice. I've been sober 3.5 years. And
Okay.
it was the scariest step to ever take, the most amazing. And what really got to the point was things about my father were starting to come up and seep through. That the booze wasn't keeping him down long enough. I had stuffed him down into my Spanx as much as I could, and they're just bubbling over everywhere. And because we think it's just going to disappear. I'll drown it and I'll shove it down and it'll be gone. And it never is until we call it out, say things out loud, acknowledge them. And so when I went to my second rehab at Betty Ford, I finally said out loud that my father was the one who abused me. And because
Oh, wow.
as a human being, just a general human being, these are the people that no matter what, we are geared to think that they're going to love and protect us. And the average human cannot even bring to the forefront of their mind that a parent would do that. And
Yeah.
the crazy
It's breaking the
thing
ultimate
is,
trust, you know?
exactly. But the craziest thing is I'm not unique. And so saying that out loud, really understanding that that was the releasing point. You cannot change it. And that acceptance, and then came the ownership. I need to own all the crap I did because I'm not responsible or in control of the things that happened to me that are true, but my actions and behaviors, absolutely. So I have, my oldest is 19, my youngest is going to be 16, and I just put everything out there. There was no lower that I
That
could
is
go.
really, yeah, that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to do that. Let me ask you this. So when you're living in a state where you're just kind of hiding it and drowning it with everything you can drown it with, that doesn't help, right? Like you said, it just
No,
kept festering and getting worse and getting worse. And on the surface, it sounds like somebody telling you, well, that happened, but you can't change it. So you just got to pick up here and own what you can own and move
Yeah.
forward. On the surface, that sounds a little cold, right? But it's loving. It's loving to be told that. And what I'm hearing from you is whenever you snap out of that and say, wow, okay, well, let me try that because the other stuff isn't working.
Hmm.
When you try that, you found some freedom. So what would you tell people who are in your earlier stage where they're just still stuck in that these things happen to me, they're terrible, which is all true. They are terrible and it's not your fault. You didn't deserve it. What do you tell those people who are stuck though in that thinking of, well, it was wrong what happened to me and poor me?
So I think, my biggest thing, again, no day in the ring. Both my parents are deceased, and there was never any sort of closure, nothing. And the acceptance of that, understanding the concreteness of that, I will not get that. So I can either just continue to slowly try and kill myself and think that I'm going to get somewhere, that then I'm going to have my day in the ring, which no. Or I can look at, my son was diagnosed with a rare disease. I developed a foundation that supports because they had nowhere to put us. They lumped us in with leukemia and lymphoma. So I developed a whole foundation. I found out there wasn't a cord blood donation program in the Philadelphia area. So I started the first and only cord blood donation program at, Mainline Health and Temple. So, there are reasons that these things fall into my lap. And when I started to look at the good that I can channel those negative emotions, and those thoughts are just constantly going. And it's not until we acknowledge them and say, oh, whoa, 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 not serving you anymore. And I call it, listening to that spidey sense. She was never wrong. We were just taught not to listen to her, that, she's emotional, she's overreactive, she's super sensitive, she's, all of these things. And she's like, I've been
Yeah.
telling you the right thing the whole time. Nimnut, you just haven't been listening to me. And so now in this glorious 51, we're like, that's what that was all about. The nausea,
Yeah.
the anxiety,
The
diarrhea,
clarity.
every physical symptom that we get when our gut is telling us something.
Yeah. You work with Gen X women. Love that. I'm a Gen Xer. And that is important because that was a big thing in our era, right? We were, a lot of us, forgotten, not really communicated well with. And so we don't communicate unless we've really done some personal work already. Then it can be hard for Gen Xers to communicate because we weren't raised that way.
No.
So do you find that working with that specific group of women that it's hard to pull them out of that?
So
Or are they ready? Are they ready to communicate?
one, they're ready. One, they're ready. They're done. Two, the communication where we got, so we had no communication. And then communication became so jumbled up and gussied and blah, 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 that it didn't make sense anymore. Right. And so I simplify everything down. I love Brene Brown. Absolutely adore. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. Period. And when you start trimming all of this nonsense that we were taught and thrown at, and all of this stuff that doesn't mean anything that we were so focused on, and really the life that we were told we were supposed to be living is not achievable. You cannot be the CEO and a full-time mom. You cannot be, just everything, and the caregiver for your aging parents and the caregiver for your children. And God forbid there's a special needs involved, and that takes a whole nother, area. And it's just not possible. It's hard. And we put these expectations on ourselves and kept failing and being like, I don't get it, because it wasn't achievable. And instead of acknowledging the survivors and powerhouses that we are, we focused on all the things that were not realistic that we didn't do. And it's just
Yeah.
reframing. It's shifting it around. Simplify it. Give yourself the credit. It is not selfish. It's not egotistical. We have done
Yeah.
amazing things, and we do not give ourselves and we do not give each other credit for it.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this for those looking for the right coach, because I do coaching as well, but not every coach is meant, like, you're not
Right.
meant for every coach, right? You've got to find the right one. So for the women that you're like, they're hearing this story and they're like, oh my gosh, like I totally identify with her. And you should definitely find a coach who's where you want to be, right? So you're
Right.
3 years sober, you've come out of all this stuff. You have these life lessons and working on a different mindset to help them get there is, for one, it's doable.
Yep.
Anybody can do it. You just have to put in the work. And two, you do need the right community and you do need accountability. So
Yes.
I truly believe in the power of coaching programs. So it's great what you're doing. How would somebody connect with you if they want to find you?
Absolutely. You can email me at Sarah, and that's with an H, SARAH, at beabutterfly.net. And that's BEA, butterfly.
Okay. Be a butterfly.
Yep. I kept it real simple.
It makes sense. And I love the analogy of a butterfly, the whole
Yes.
transformation that happens. I think a lot of people have heard this now, but I didn't know it for many years that when the caterpillar is coming out of that cocoon, it's very painful.
Oh,
That
yeah.
transformation is not an easy process. So
No,
it's a lot of work, right?
it
But
is.
man,
It
the
is.
beauty on
But
the other side.
it's a lot of work to be miserable. It's a lot of work to be
Exactly.
stuck. The amount of energy that we spend in that filth that we get comfortable in, if we just reframe it and redirect it, the brain is the
Exactly.
most complex and the least understood.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, I love what you're doing, and your
Thank you.
story is definitely very powerful. I'm glad you've come through all that, and I'm glad that you are sober and you're giving back and you're using your narrative to be a source of inspiration, strength, and encouragement. So that's something to be proud of,
Well, thank you
right?
so much for having me, Edwina. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'll make sure you have all of her information so you get a hold of her if she is resonating with you and you're looking for that right partner to help you. Okay, have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for listening. Two things. If today's episode brought you inspiration, strength, or a new perspective, I would be so appreciative if you subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps me keep bringing stories and insights that matter most to you. And second of all, to stay connected or engage with the community, go to edwinaadams.com/links. That's LINKS. And remember, you're one step closer to building beyond your adversity and crafting a life of impact and purpose. Keep making noise, and we'll see you on the next episode.